Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today we're looking at the UTG Pro 15-inch Keymod Handguard in flat dark earth, installed here on my Smith & Wesson M&P 15 Sport with a nice low-profile gas block. There are a lot of reasons to think about going with a Keymod Handguard, and a lot more reasons to think about going with this UTG version of it, namely made in the USA. We'll talk about a lot of those other reasons throughout this review, so stick around. Pretty excited about the Keymod system and pretty excited about this particular rail, so let's get into it. Let's start talking about it. As you can see on the table, I also have this one. This is my Palmetto State Armory gun with the Midwest Industries, I think 13-inch Keymod rail on it. It's got some interesting features as well. I may touch on this in a standalone video in the future. For the money, at around 150 bucks for this 15-inch one, you ought to really consider that, because that's some pretty, you're going to get some great features for those dollars, and we'll touch on as many of those as I can remember to touch on. But covering some specs on it, as I said, it's 15 inches, it's super slim, as UTG USA calls it. It's Keymod compatible, clearly, free-floating with the proprietary barrel nut design, and here's a look at that. This is actually a replacement one that they sent me with some replacement screws. As you may have seen in other videos, they apparently had a bad batch of screws that they sent out. Now they feel that there is absolutely no need to use Loctite on those screws. Just torque them down pretty nicely and they will hold up fine. At least that's what they told me. And from what I understand is they've had issues with, where they have had issues, I should say, with screws breaking and stripping, are in cases where Loctite has been used, blue Loctite, or I don't know, perhaps red Loctite as well, but in my case, blue Loctite. So I got a new barrel nut. I also got new screws. I won't go into the full installation, because if you look at the user manual and you get into it, it's really not hard to do. I did pretty much all of this myself. I did get some help from a friend, Doc Tech Dad, in removing some other parts from this gun in order to be able to do the work that I needed to do. But as far as assembling this, getting both the barrel nut, the spacers, getting the rail, get everything screwed in, it was pretty easy job. It really was. I love the fact that we have these tabs right here, which you can see, and I'll try to rotate that a little bit. That actually comes over the upper receiver a little bit, locks it down, makes it so that whole rail cannot rotate. And that means that your Picatinny is going to line up here, and you're going to have one continuous rail going all the way out 15 inches, which is really cool. You do not have that on this one here. You have something different where it locks into that nut right there instead. Okay, it has a couple smaller tabs that lock in there instead of two great big tabs, one on either side. So you've got these two little tabs on each side. Is there potential for some shifting, some movement? I suppose there's a little more potential on the Midwest Industries one than there would be on the UTG, just due to the fact that you've got a much bigger tabs here. This one is Cerakoted in magpul flat dark earth, and I gotta say that they did a fantastic job with that. It matches up perfectly to the magpul furniture that I have on here. And look guys, when you're talking about magpul colors, even magpul equipment, okay, their actual stuff issued from magpul will vary very slightly from batch to batch. Okay, so if this was bought a couple of years ago and this was bought this year, you put them next to each other, they may not be perfect matches. There may be a slight variation in tone and in value. But, I mean, with that in mind, all of this matches really well, and this matches up with that perfectly in my view, and with this perfectly and that perfectly. So wow, I mean, it's just really cool. I mean, they can always say, hey, it's flat dark earth, but it actually matches Magpul flat dark earth really well. So that's spectacular. That's really cool. It comes with a couple rail pieces, also done in the Cerakoted flat dark earth. Or you can also get it not only I should say in flat dark earth. You can get it in just a black. You can get it in, I think it's well, a handful of other colors. You can look it up. But it does come with these 2 rail sections. This one right here with 8 slots. There also comes with a 4 slot section. For the life of me, I can't find that one, so I don't have it to show you on camera. But it does come with both of those, so that's great. Let's cover some of the finishing touches and some of the things that just make this rail look really nice. Here on the Picatinny on the top, you can actually see some scallops. Let me point these out. You see this right here at the edges, how those are scalloped away, kind of grooved out. Look at that. I think you can see a little better from the top. Okay, that makes for easier placement of Picatinny gear onto these slots, and just generally no snag. Okay, you're not going to have those kind of sharp edges that you might have otherwise, because they are kind of scalloped away, kind of in a rounded fashion. That's a finishing touch that you almost don't expect from UTG. If you think about UTG products and sort of their reputation over the years, I have not come to expect amazing, beautiful stuff from them. That's changed. Okay, UTG is up there now, and they're doing great stuff, especially with the Leapers UTG USA stuff, the UTG Pro stuff. There you go. UTG Pro, made in USA. They're taking care of and doing great work with all their pieces, so I'm really impressed. You can see also just kind of some great ergonomics on this. It's well-rounded, and whether you have some sort of a foregrip or nothing on there, it's going to be very comfortable in hand, holding on to that. Dissipates heat pretty well. From all the shooting I did with it, I found that it did not get uncomfortably hot. Of course, you're going to feel some heat from that barrel. Now, this handguard is definitely going to be compatible with whatever length gas system you have. I have a carbine length gas system on this M&P 15 Sport, and I had no issue with it. Okay, the block is right here. You can see that. And if it were up a little further and even further than that, you would still have no issues with it because of the spacing and because of the clearance that you have throughout. If I didn't say it before, it is machined from 6061 T6 aircraft grade aluminum, which means you're going to have some great durability from it. Now, let's speak a little bit about the durability, because I see some weaknesses, some potential weaknesses in the Keymod system. Let's see if I can address it right now, and I'll talk about sort of my experience with that in a moment. But if we get in really close and look at the Keymod system, let me try to point this out to you. So how it works is, the Keymod rails will latch into these little holes, right, and then slide forward. And I think you can just see here a sort of shelf underneath there, and that is where that Keymod lug will sort of slide forward and cinch up to, right? That is a very thin little wall there for that lug to cinch up against. It gets really, really thin in there, so you don't have a huge amount of support for that rail piece. And I think that's not an issue with the UTG rail. That's an issue or a potential downside of the Keymod system in general. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's the Midwest Industries, it doesn't matter if it's UTG, it doesn't matter what brand it is, they're all going to have roughly the same wall thickness at that locking point. And so that could be a downside depending on how much stress you put on that rail or that accessory. Well, Scout, how do you know that that's going to be a potential problem? Let me show you. Here's what I stupidly did right here. And this is an example of what not to do with virtually anything. But this is what I accidentally did, or foolishly did, I should say, with my rail. Check this out. You see that right there? Yes, you can. That is one of those walls that got ripped out. It did. It got ripped out. That little Keymod slot is useless now because, again, they got ripped out. How did they get ripped out? Well, here's the story. Here's what I did. Very, very stupid. But it also demonstrates or sort of illustrates one of the potential limitations of the Keymod system, as I pointed out earlier. So what happened there was, I was actually trying to reattach my bird cage here. And I was torquing that down, I was holding onto it, I was holding onto the rail here, and I was cranking, and I wasn't getting enough torque, and I wasn't getting it far enough. And so what did I do? I grabbed onto this, just like so, okay? And then I started torquing it like that, or this, or whatever I was doing. I don't remember which direction I was doing it. But I was pulling on this at the same time that I was pulling on this, and I was trying to get a great amount of torque going, and too much leverage just ripped that piece out. Okay, it ripped it right out. So I think I had, at the time, probably the rail I was using was probably the 4 slot rail. So I had it maybe just in 2 of those little Keymod slots, and it just bent one all the way out. It just bent it out. I ended up kind of flattening that back down so it was nice and flush. It wouldn't have a barb there to scratch me. But yeah, that one is basically useless now. I cannot use that spot anymore because of my foolishness. Now, I emphasize that it was because of my foolishness, okay? It's if you don't do that to your Keymod rail, you're probably never going to have anything like that happen. But does that also illustrate a potential weakness? I think maybe so. I don't know what situation you could possibly get in where you would need to put that sort of torque on your handguard. But if you ever did, perhaps know that there's a slight weakness there and there's a potential for a slight failure. I'm sure you've seen lots of other videos demonstrating how Keymod works at this point, but I'll do a quick demonstration for you as well. Essentially, here it is. You can see that there's the base of your Keymod rail. You've got a little arrow pointing forward saying that is the way that you slide forward. And there's really only one way that this can work. So basically these lugs slide forward into these little slots, and then these holes rest inside of the larger holes that you see there, locking it into places there and there. Okay, so that's basically how that works. And if we slide it in, here's what we basically get. We'll just set this anywhere for now. We bring it up here, we set it into this spot. Let's say I want to have a flashlight. Maybe I want to put my flashlight on this side, accessible from here. I would put that right there, slide it just forward enough that those protruding circles that I pointed out before land inside of these hole areas. Push it just far enough that happens. There we go, and now we are locked in. Then you get your little Allen key and you just start turning these screws. And what happens there is those lugs are sort of in a fixed position. Like they'll come up and down, but they will not rotate. Okay, so the screw kind of rotates down into the lug itself, pulling that lug up and locking it into that position. So it's a really neat design. And what you end up with is a very stationary piece of rail that was extremely easy, perfectly easy to install completely from the outside of the handguard. And that is the real benefit to the Keymod system. You can adjust this, move things around, put things in different places so quickly and so easily. Whether it's a rail, it doesn't have to be a rail at all. It could be something like this, BCM, gunfighter. We have a kinesthetic angled grip. Okay, so this is also Keymod. You can see that, those pieces right there. So I can take this out of the package and I can add this on wherever I want this to be. So let's say I want that in place of this or something. I want to put it up here. You can set it up here and slide it forward. Move it a little further back in order for it to work properly. But I can set that in there, slide it forward, and that will kind of land into that spot. And then using the correct, looks like an Allen key there, I would screw that down, and now that's my handguard. Okay, and look how flush that is. So when we have accessories that actually attach by way of Keymod, rather than attaching to a rail that attaches to the Keymod, that is incredibly minimal. And just, it's light, it's simple, It's so flush and so clean. And I love that about the system in general. So overall, I think the Keymod system is fantastic because of how well it lends itself to modification, changing things up, moving things around from the outside, not needing to take the whole handguard off and repositioning a whole bunch of things, but doing it from right here, from right on the outside. I think it's great for that. It means that this rifle can be a one gun for all kinds of things. You want to set it up for home defense, you want to set it up for competition, you want to set it up for a training outing, or whatever it might be. You can easily reposition all that stuff, have it where you need it to be, without having to take the whole gun apart. You know, that's a fantastic aspect of the Keymod system, and that's why I was so interested in trying it out. The UTG Pro Keymod rail in the 15-inch variety, as I said before, runs about 150 bucks. It'll be a little bit less depending on the size you get. You can get them smaller and smaller to be, you know, whichever size you want it to be. If you like that long reach out there, fully covering the barrel and being able to grasp that way out there, then definitely I think the 15-inch covers your bases and gives you all of that reach. A 13-inch would be all right too, and of course just whatever size you prefer based on how you want to set your gun up. Pretty much the key phrase with this Keymod Handguard from UTG is bang for your buck. You get a lot for your money. It's made in the USA, made out of 6000 series aluminum. It's pretty good quality. Sure, I think the Keymod system has its potential weaknesses if you use it wrong or abuse it, as I have in some cases. But if you use it pretty normally, as most people will, I think there's nothing wrong with it, and the advantages, in my mind, far outweigh the potential weaknesses. So I really like the Keymod system, and I think this UTG Pro Keymod rail is definitely a good buy. Thanks to UTG, of course, for sending me this one for trial and review. I'm the late Boy Scout. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you guys later.
And we have this burnt bronze. It's immediately available right now.
That is beautiful.
Okay. And then we have these oldie green that's I already shown everybody.
Which is very flat.